Well, guys, I kicked out a few mini scenes, and then it dawned on me, hey, why not do a small clinic? This one, guys, is of course it's on my Minneapolis Northland Railroad Company, and you are going to see a majority of the mini scenes tonight on the railroad, but there are others you won't see. If you remember, the Minneapolis Northland Railroad Company is really a freelance railroad, and it is based loosely on the MNS. So in concept and for example, the prototype ran from Minneapolis to Northfield, so does mine, 70-mile short line, bridge route, etc. But anyway, we'll cover some of the things as we go along. So we start off in Minneapolis. You notice here we have gentleman is at a scratch built dock, which most of the buildings on my railroad, I'll mention them, are scratch built or they're highly kit modified. But this dock was scratch built. But the guys, you notice, it's a beautiful spring day. The railroad set in spring, in theory, 1955 on a Saturday. So this gentleman, in 55, we were all basically still working on Saturdays. The gentleman is waiting for somebody to help load up one of the tractors, and he'll be hauling it off to local implement dealer. So he decided on this beautiful spring day, he's not going to sit in that old Mac. Instead, he's over there parked underneath the tree. And then you got, of course, the officers of the corporation. They have to come out once in a while and end up in the yard with their white shirt and hard hat. This guy's standing there. He arrived. He's checking out the new GP9 that was purchased by the railroad, and that's down there in the lower left-hand corner. Over at Schwenke Cement, we got a couple of young guys. One guy is unusual car, a Cadillac to serve as his hot rod, but he just had the stripes painted on it. Now I got this car from I name a lot of industry on my railroad after operators. And so I named it Schwenke, and that's when this Cadillac showed up, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But eventually it hit me, hey, we'll create a hot rod scene at the cement plant. Here we have Kruger's, which is potato and vegetable warehouse. This is a prototype over in St. Paul. And here, this one is a foam core building scratch. You see it here with various things added, and it is there is some selective compression here, but the scene is, and the figures you're going to see date from way back, like in this scene where you got a Western figure leaning up against the back wall, and that truck there is an old Varney truck, and don't write those old early 50s models off. A lot of them, like that Varney, can be converted into very respectable looking models that add to the layout. Here we have over at Thermogas. This again is a copy of a facility in Annandale, Minnesota. And the tanks, people ask about their model die casting tank car. That's what the tanks are. As you see, and then you got the bobtail truck, and that is an International with a tank I put on it. And the scene itself is just the guys ready to get to fill the empty propane or bobtail truck, and they'll be out making the local deliveries. Then you get down to Northern Power, which is the coal plant, which I figure I am one who had to model the coal pile. To me, I see a lot of them modeled on various railroads, but nobody wants to take up the space to model that coal pile. So, and everywhere I went, they were always moving that coal. There were, the small cats were there up and down or whatever. Now in this scene, you got two Woodland Scenics cats, which are a low end product. Now, if you want the high end product, you go down to the lower right hand corner, and that's the Architect one. And that comes in many, many pieces, and it takes quite a time to assemble. As you move on down the road, you can see the coal pile still in the plant. We arrive at Bass Lake Junction. Now, this building is a scratch built, an exact copy of the flag stop that stood at Orchard Gardens on the MNS. On my railroad, we call it Bass Lake Junction. You notice the lady there, well, she's waiting on either number 3, depending on if she's going to Northfield, she'll come back in the afternoon, or she was waiting for the Doodlebug #2 out of Northfield. Now, the farmer you see sitting there with his milk cans in the truck, what that's all about is that on my railroad, we still go back to when the railroad served to pick up. This is prior, remember, we're 55, 50. And as a result, at this time, we still don't have the trucks have really taken over. They started taking over in 56. So at this time still, there was like an LCL service. Milk was done the same way. Reefer comes by empty in the morning, picks up all the milk cans from the farmers. We will get down to Northfield, unload it in the creamery. Then we load up empty milk cans, and they come back in the afternoon. The farmer would be dropped off here. Farmer would pick up his empty cans to recycle in the morning. Then, of course, the MN&S, as my railroad, went through a lot of farmland country. And so this is the Hamilton farm on mine. And again, in following kind of with the spring theme, you notice he's hooking up the planters. So he's going to go out there and do a little bit of planting on the railroad. We get off. It seems everybody's got to have hobos on the railroad, right? And in my case, the hobos are a little bit special. If you count them, I started a group of modelers that we currently have. We had 9, which is what you count the hobos here, but I'll have to remove one again. I keep the number of hobos there, the number of people in our group, and it's a Tuesday night round robin. We've been operating on Tuesday nights since about 1974. So that's the reason for my hobo camp, to give it some purpose on the railroad. And we move on to the other side. That is on one side of Memorial Lake where they can slide off the bank. On the other side, you see, here we have a combination of mini scenes creating the entire scene. You see a couple of fishermen sitting up at the top, directly above the Lund boat there, way up on the other side. The wife of one of those gentlemen is just kind of there, came along with them, looking at the lake. Then you got the Lund scene. They're backing up. They're going to throw the rods in the water, see if they can catch fish here, there. And then you always got the early spring people who are out there catching the first rays of the sun. And usually you got somebody trying to coax the youngster in to start teaching them how to swim. If you move over a little bit into the actual park area, springtime, right? See that young couple sitting there in the background holding hands? I'm sure a lot of you can remember in your day when that was the thing we all did. Then as you move, by the way, the trees, for what they're worth, if you're interested, these particular ones are azalea trunks that picked up from the local nursery. Down below, even though we got a young couple in the background, we have an older couple, obviously, enjoying that spring sunshine, also having a picnic lunch in the park area. Now we move on down the railroad a little bit. We're now approaching Little Chicago. You got the local freight, you got the freight house down there. That's another scratch built structure. And you have, every once in a while, you got to clean that freight room out, right? So he's sweeping out the freight room. And again, you got not all mini scenes have to be on the exterior of buildings. They obviously, if you going to put an interior in a building such as this, you got really 2 mini scenes. You got the office, desk, paperwork, etc., water cooler. On the other side, in the freight house being swept out, the freight room, you got the other product there. At the station in Little Chicago, here you got the typical that you used to see it at the stations. You got the wife has brought the husband who's going to catch the train, got to get that goodbye kiss in. Then you got a family waiting on the train as well as another couple. And that's just part of the entire scene. So you got one little mini scene. If you look at it, you also got the porter up there. He's loading baggage. So when the train arrives, they'll load the baggage cart. You also got the REA Express making a delivery at the present time. You go down to the town of Little Chicago itself. My railroad is based in theoretically on the small communities that the railroad served. In this, again, you got many scenes here. The overall idea to predict a Saturday, let's say on a Saturday, This was a big thing in small towns. In this case, Little Chicago, they've just purchased that new fire truck, and they're really proud of that baby. So they've got to have an event on a Saturday. You know, local newspaper said, guys, local radio, come on and see our new fire truck. But the scene itself, if we go up to the corner, if you notice on the right-hand side, there's actually a window washer working up there with the store manager, which is Rexall Drug, uh, making sure he does his job. A couple ladies walking down the street, they were shopping down there at the drugstore. They're walking on down, their husband's standing on the corner on this end of the block, checking out the new fire truck. And if you notice, there's a lady checking into the hotel over there, the Cozy Rest, and she's had her luggage carried. Now, even since this is a big event, you know, a new fire truck, even the guy from Minneapolis, the fire chief, has come in for the event. So he's got his car parked down at the fire station, which is on the other side of this cafe. If you notice, that's the car on the left side of the street, behind the green one back there. Now, then you got the truck itself. If any of you want to build them, that's the Sylvan model, one of the Sylvan models fire truck. Obviously, the event is, you know, you got Bob's has set up his hot dog stand and some other foods. Then you also got, in the small towns, balloons were big. You had to have balloons for the locals. So he's trying to sell a few balloons here. We move on down to the local on the other side. You know, you always got the people or the younger generation. They're not interested in that new fire truck. They're more interested in their cars. So Woodland Scenics was kind enough to give us this scene of people washing their cars. So all I had to do was find a place to put it, bring out a hose so they could fill the buckets and spray off the soap, right? If you go down a little bit further on the scupper on the back of that building, which is a corner, which is the bank building, you have an older gentleman walking towards the back door. And then if you, at the gray vehicle, you got, remember our old manners? We were all taught you're supposed to open doors for the young ladies. So that's what the gentleman's doing. Now, if you go back to the far back corner of the scene, you see a lady, I shouldn't say young necessarily, a lady standing back there. And you say, well, what's that all about? Well, there she's taken mom or her mother, and they're catching the local Greyhound bus. Michael's, which was one of the original buildings that's began with town Little Chicago, still has the Greyhound contract. And you notice there's always that late person running to catch that bus. Above it, you got the gas station. Simple scene, just the guy, there's a car parked there, he's filled up. He's probably inside paying for it. Now you also notice on the far right, if you notice just below the fire hydrant, Minnesota, we have our wonderful winters here, as you kind of do in Michigan and the other parts, people viewing, and we develop potholes when they plow. So you notice there's one of those typical potholes that the spring road crews will be out taking care of. We also, sorry about that. Then this one you guys, some of you have seen, this is the elevator that one of the locals picking up some feed. At the same time, you got the figure that's by the tractor. You got him climbing up on the tractor. He's waiting for that guy to clear because he's brought in a load of grain that was stored in the winter that he's now wants to sell. He'll be hopping on the tractor, pulling in and getting it weighed and selling it. If you're interested in that grain elevator, that was built many, many years ago. It is actually the prototype it's measured up from the prototype that stood on the Emmons St. L that was in Jordan, Minnesota. And this one, that's kitchen tinfoil you see in there. And that was just put over a bastard file to create the grooves in the covering. On the back side of the elevator, you got the Chicago Northwestern interchange, which is over on the left side over there. And you got a couple of the guys that are working the Saturday maintenance crew. And right at the time, there's nobody around. So before somebody gives them orders to what they're going to do, they're sitting in there grabbing a game of checkers. Then you get over to Wooden Container, where a gentleman is picking up an order on a Saturday. He's ordered some small wooden boxes, and they're in that order that's being brought out to him. If you're interested in the vehicle itself, this is one of the Williams Brothers vehicles that came out in plastic that you were in kit form that you could assemble. The building itself, again, just another scratch built building that I did along the way. Obviously, along when I was younger, not the case, but as I developed my gray hair and the grandchildren came along, I would once in a while we'd go rail fanning, excuse me. And so first it was the grandson, then the granddaughter, and I would take them out once in a while. And neither of them now, of course, the grandson's working, he's 26, and neither of them have an interest in trains. So I failed in that respect, make and model railroaders. Now, another scene to create that Saturday effect, there's a wedding over at the local church. By the way, all the buildings in this scene are scratch, except with the exception of the brick building that's up in the far right corner. Those are the original model die casting modules that were the first ones ever in the marketplace that I am aware of. And that's eventually, we saw other companies now have been producing modules, but those were done in plastic. You could build them into various. But back to the church scene, you got the wedding taking place. As in all weddings, eventually you got to get the photos taken. So you got the professional photographer there. And there's always another amateur got to take those family photos. Down below by the flagpole by the school, you notice the youngster. He could care less about that wedding or those photos being taken. He's more interested over at the school where that swing set is. That might be a lot more fun for him than standing around with mom or dad. And he might also be seeing those couple guys there that he can see past the teeter-totter, which is the local guys on a Saturday over at the schoolyard playing a little ball. Then we move on to the back of the area. We got some of the people in the church have volunteered to work the parish garden. And I had to have a gardening scene on there. My parents were avid gardeners. My father, more so, up to at times, he had a 1/4 acre, and we obviously couldn't eat the food. A lot of it was donated to the food banks, etc. But the other thing here is that in this scene, if you springtime wise, you notice behind the garage, the lilacs are in bloom, springtime. And if you notice down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see there's some rail. I got the idea for this. My grandfather's garden, one of them was on the Milwaukee Road up on the hillside. He lived above the line. And this was in the area of Minnesota where the Milwaukee went into Lonsdale, Minnesota, which is now obviously a bike trail or that type of trail. But that's why the gardening scene here, I don't do vegetables, I just do flowers. But anyway, over at the town of Tunnel City, a friend of mine put the feed mill with my name on it on his railroad. And I thought, well, damn, there can't be one on his railroad. We got to expand this company. So I bought the kit. I built one and put it on the railroad. Obviously, it's a feed mill, so we're just various loading of various trucks on a Saturday, grabbing what they need. We also, Tunnel City is divided as the real Tunnel City was, a small station here, again with a few people waiting on, whether it be number 3, the passenger train, or number 2, the doodlebug that goes into Minneapolis in the morning. But and the small station as it was on in actual Tunnel City. But on the other side of the tunnel, you also have the takeoff on my railroad of the Randolph branch, which I just added in some time. And these I kind of sent out already to some of you have seen these. This is General Tire and Rubber, where you have, that's the 47 Silva model truck put together. That's one of their latest ones that they have available. And as you can see, they're loading a large equipment tire out there that will be loaded onto that truck. Next door, food producers, we got a gentleman just came out to enjoy the spring air. So I try, as you can see here, a lot of the people in a stationary movement. I think, and it's been written many times, that if you keep them in stationary movements, it rather than a real action thing, it provides more realism to the scene. Here, simply, you got a guy, whether it be loading or picking up a load, he's heading for the truck drivers, heading for the door, right, to get him to open up to do one load or unload. As we go up the line, another simple scene that is very easy to create is some person opening up a door. Here we happen to be at Brininger Pickle on my railroad, and it's a salting station. And that salting station, if you get to the backside, yeah, a couple of guys, a guy bringing in pickles that would be moved on via to the northwestern New Guinea, but in Chaska, Minnesota, they would be. But here, and it's a typical scene, as I say, figures just standing, shooting a breeze a little bit before they're doing the unloading process. You move up to the station, which is a copy of the station that sits in Sussex, Wisconsin. And that was on one of the Milwaukee lines there. You notice, again, a couple silver models in the scene, but the real thing is to catch the people. You notice the red-haired gentleman, the salesman, he's got his sales case sitting there waiting for the next train. You got another salesman reading it with his case, reading the newspaper. Back to that guy with the red head, he's there playing checkers with the local, probably for a quarter a game or so back in this era. And then you got over by, they pulled the bench out, normally sits under the station window with the spring sun out there, and it's a beautiful day. They want to be in that sunshine. Again, if you notice on the platform to the far right, you got the milk cans that will be picked up by Extra West, or locally known by the crews as the milk peddler. Then we get over to the lumber yard, and when this DeSoto that you see there, the green one with the rack, when that came out, that's by Oxford Automobile Company out of England. They start when Mini Metals, they also, like Mini Metals, produce the white castings, beautiful vehicles, well done. You can open them up. They have screws so you can get to the interior. And when this came out, I was really disappointed. It had that stupid rack on top. And then it dawned me, no, that the vehicle's fine, it's you. This guy's a model railroader, or he's a DIY guy who does his own work. So he went off to the lumberyard to pick up some lumber. So that's what we have there. Now, the lumberyard building, again, the scratch built, my grandfather worked in that. That stood in Lonsdale, Minnesota at one time. You notice there's one guy there standing, he's reading the local new safety regs that have just been posted by management. Then you got the guy over on the other side leaning on the rake, supposed to be working. Instead, he's admiring that Ford coupe that he's dreaming about, that he hopes one day he'll be able to own. Back in the sheds themselves, rather from the main building, we're loading, again, that happens to be a Magnuson model, 53 Chevy that they're loading up to take over to lumber to a project. You got some of the other materials that'll be needed that are in one of the crates the two guys are dragging, and gentlemen bringing some from the main building on the wheelbarrow. You notice the old truck that they used to use at Brooks Lumber was the old Mack that's parked in the back. Haven't had the heart yet to get rid of it. Now, if we go back to that lumber that's being cut, that's loaded on the truck, if we flip the lights on in the facility, you notice there's a mini scene in there in itself, and that's the crosscut saw. I did some research and et cetera, and visited a couple where so this one we're using watch gears. It's got the motor, all the belts, et cetera, to provide the crosscut operation that would be at the lumber mill. Over across the tracks on the other side, we have this is pretty much disappearing, but there's still got some ice there. Was popular at one time, but now all we have left, obviously, is they're still there, but you notice the building is not in the best shape. And we have on this Saturday, a guy, whatever the function be, is picking up a black ice. They'll chop up and move to whatever his function is. Now, across the tracks from these, you see that not all mini scenes, again, have to be people. Notice there is a platform there, a concrete platform, in the footings that where a water tank stood. On the Minneapolis and Northland, the dieselizing is almost done. There's very little steam left. So the AFE has been cut to start removing some of the water tanks. That in itself creates that scene there. And of course, at the top of the hill, another spring scene to the young people flying kites in the spring. We all used to do it. This was not an original. When I stole this one on one of the railroads I was visiting, I saw this scene and I could not resist. It's to me, it was spring all the way. Then, of course, you get down in the yard. It's a crew shift time change as crews are shifting, and you got them guys before they're actually going on duty. Here they are standing around shooting a breeze. So that's pretty typical. And then here's another scratch built structure. This one happens to be the ice loading dock. The dock here in town, takes care of the loading of the Swift reefers. These two gentlemen are on break from the standpoint, they've just loaded a Swift reefer. So while they're waiting for the local switcher to put in the next one for them, which this facility can only take 2 reefers at a time, they're just waiting there, shooting it a little bit. Now you notice if you look over the boxcar, underneath the light, there is a lineman over there on the pole. And that's because that one of the brackets is given away on the upper cross arm so they've got a crew over there here on a Saturday working to get that replaced. Now over at the creamery, same thing. We got a couple guys on a Saturday sneaking out when they can to get into that nice fresh sunshine into the air. And you got one guy sucking down a soda pop. So while they're taking the time off. Then you get back to the yard, you notice here we got the old ash pit still remaining on the railroad, because if you notice back by the roundhouse, we, as I said, primarily dieselization taking place, but you have that one steam engine left over there. And the purpose of that is that, and I currently don't have it running, but it will be before long. On the MNS, they, on Saturdays for sporting events, particularly, especially the football specials, they would put together 2 or 3 coaches or whatever, and steam engine would pull it into from Northfield to Minneapolis. And after the sporting events was take place, reload, and they would bring them back on this end. And so that's why the ash pit's there. You notice all the utensils for the ash pit. I, at one time in our group, we used to exchange Christmas presents years back. And one year I built this as a kit for each of the guys for their Christmas gift. Other than that, you see the crews are just maintaining the equipment. If you also notice, they're in the middle of the scene over by the cattle chute. There's a guy in a red shirt walking with the guy with the lunch pail. Well, that's the new hire. He's being taken by the mentor up to the roundhouse foreman up to the roundhouse where he's going to work. He's been hired on as a new mechanic. Then we go over to what we all used to do, grabbed our cameras on a Saturday. And if we weren't hanging around some railroad facility, I used to putz around, hang around the MNS on Saturdays. I'd be out with the camera. Now these guys they're interested in that doodle bug I talked about. That's number 2. That's parked over at the station in Northfield. And that's normally the morning run. It comes back in the afternoon is number 7. The doodle bug carries 1 coach, and that's a rebuilt Harriman to build it into a doodle bug. Then we get over to the station, and the station, as you see, again, the typical station type scene. This is one of the first scratch built structures I ever did. And I am thinking about in Northfield, they did have a brick station. I'm thinking of replacing this. So we'll see if that happens. But again, here's this pretty typical scene, except you notice on the right over by the cars, there's a photographer taking photos. Again, that got to have a photo of every trip, but maybe he's taking a photo of the other person or that lady standing there. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner, maybe she's not in the shots after all. He could be taking photos of the equipment that's sitting in the yard. So you can never be sure. Then we get over to, we now get off the Minneapolis Northfield railway company, and we get over to the Milwaukee. The Milwaukee is in the town of Eureka Center. And here we have Leone Foundry as one of the industries. The years ago at the foundry, this foundry actually exists, and it's Acme Foundry today. And this is let me say it's a smaller version of it, but they used to actually just come in with regular scrap to be loaded to the blast furnaces. Now it all comes in. I have a friend who works there. This is in current operation. They all come in baled scrap. So you have the mini scene to handle the baled scrap. And again, in my case, the conveyor, that's a Woodland Scenic small crane that they came out with, which many of you have seen. I took the bucket off and created that so it could handle the baled scrap iron to put those on the conveyor going in. And of course, there you got office management out there making sure the guys are going to work. And here's the rest of the Leone Foundry. This is how the prototype actually looks as it does. The backside I've changed because for my purpose a little bit, but this is the foundry that's Acme. And here we have the truck driver that is backing in. And of course, you got to have one of the guys and think that he can't put it in there without help. So he's standing there assisting him. But that's a Fruenhof trailer again. That's a Sylvan's Fruenhof trailer. And this foundry, for what it's worth, guys, originally, and they still do today, the scrap, once it comes out of the blast furnaces, goes into molds. This creates all the manhole covers that are sold, that Minneapolis and St. Paul uses, and all surrounding communities throughout the state of Minnesota and outside the state of Minnesota. They also produce today the brake shoes they cast for the BNSF. Now, in my day, of course, 55, they weren't doing it for the BNSF. It would have been the Great Northern, Sioux Line, et cetera, at that time. And finally, guys, we got one down at the local station, and the agent's got his car Ford parked there, but that's an old REA truck. I believe that one is the Jordan miniature ones, and the gentleman is unloading a few packages and whatever that's going to go to the local station. So guys, that's it. That's you've seen the majority of the mini scenes that I have on the railroad, and I'll bail out of this, and then we can go back, and if you have any questions, we can do that. Okay, let me stop sharing the screen, and we're back. Anybody got any questions?
Lester, what did you do as a living?
I was an accountant.
Okay. Did you breathe?
I was in the accounting profession, and in the accounting profession, I worked for Control Data Corporation. I originally started out in the CPA world with, I originally, guys, I had a 2-year degree. And I started off in, believe it or not, secondary education, history and English. And when they allowed me to try to do a little student teaching, I realized I'd kill them before I taught them. So I decided it wasn't for me after all. So I ran down to the local, I was at that time, now I'd already lost a couple of years. So I went and looked, and, I couldn't be a doctor. That was blood. Architect, that's too much math. Well, accounting, believe it or not, it's almost like the law in that it's rules and regulations, more so than it really is knowing numbers. And so I chose accounting, and ended up with Pete Murrick when I started, and then eventually Control Data. And there I moved around quite a bit. So anything from, local inventories to traveling to do audits of warehouses, et cetera, et cetera. At the end, it was a sad world. I saw it go to 63,000. They kicked my butt out at about 8,000 when we're down. And so I had the opportunity, and before I ever went to work, I started working for picking berries, nickel a box in my day. And so I tried before in my college years to get on various ends of the business. So one day I could, just do that. So guys, that's kind of my background. And I was in the accounting profession, started with Pete Marwick, ended up at Control Data. So that's my background. And as a result, I wanted to be an architect too along the way, but as I said, that didn't fit in the plans. And that's where, and I lived within only a couple blocks of the railroad. I lived near the Northwestern. I lived about 9 blocks from the school, the grade school area. So when I walked, guys, I got to cross the Milwaukee. I actually got to see, that line I said my grandfather had a garden on the Milwaukee, which came out of Montgomery, went through Lonsdale, Prairie Lake, came up into Shakopee, and where it crossed, I would see steam running in my day there too when I was coming home from the local grade school. Anyway, that's my background, guys. So accounting, and that's why you see the structures. Like I worked for Green Giant in the Montgomery, and my father actually farmed till I was 4, and my grandfather's one of them continued to farm. That's why the farm background. I used to work on the farms a couple weeks in the summer, like probably many of you did, and so you can see that's it. All kind of gels for me on in the railroad.
It was a great presentation. I just never saw you breathe.
Well, we try. Well, I try to get it in for a half hour, or a little bit over. If we have, I told Greg I try to cover only 35 minutes if I take your time.
That was really great.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, the figures and the scenes were just so impressive. How'd you get all the figures
Well, the
in
figures,
the
they believe it
different
or not,
poses?
okay, the various figures, some of them are in the poses as you can buy them. And they go back as far as the first metal figures that we used to have. If you remember the Weston figures, they were metal, pre-painted. So like I saw that first gentleman that was standing there up against in that, over at Kruger's, he was standing up against the wall. He's just out of the box. A lot of the Woodland Scenics figures, Pizer ones can be used. But if I have to, remember I said on the tractor, that was an example. There's a guy, I will bend him into the shape I want. And originally, I don't recommend trying to heat them. I tried that in my day to move the arms and legs the way I want them. And no, you melt them. And I can tell you, they turn into nice puddles of plastic. So I just nowadays, if I want to change an arm or a leg or reshape it, I just take a needle nose and break it off, literally, then reglue it and form it in the positions I want. And again, to do that, I don't know if you guys head to the art supply stores once in a while. All the artists have these little wooden figures that you can put their arms and legs in different forms. My wife wouldn't pose for me, so I had to go buy one of those little guys, and they're not very expensive. They're a few bucks. And as a result, I'll put them in the form I think I need for that figure. And as a result, that's how I formed the various figures. And like I say, some are Woodland Scenic, some are Pizer. There are some cheap figures that are out there. So it's wherever, and a lot of times I have quite a few figures that I've bought because I want one particular figure in the set, if you know what I mean. You've got that scene in mind, and here it is. And if I don't, I'm lazy too. If I don't have to bend up a figure, and by the way, I used to do wax figures too, but no more. I'm too old for that. That takes too much time. Where you form up. You can take wire, make a wire shape of the figure, then do it, melt wax and cover it with wax and paint it up, etc. So it just depends. There are lots of good figures out there to work with.
You did such a nice job with the shadows. Was the shadows because of the lighting, or did you actually
shadows
color the shadows?
The shadows, if you're talking about in the scenes, it's purposely, I was trying to show spring sunshine, the days. And so the lighting is set up so that different areas of the railroad reflect different shadows. And in the photography, I try to, a lot of times people say, well, that shadow shouldn't be there. Yes, it should. I think because it designates, there's the sun is out there. In this case, it's a beautiful day. And some people want to be in the sun, others want to be in the shade. I'm a shade bum, so.
It was
I'm
very
too old.
effective.
I'm
Very
too old.
effective.
This can get awful red and skin starts to fall off, so I don't care for that at all.
No, me neither.
But that's basically, so the mini scenes, you got to understand, I've also been working on them since the 70s. I started early a little bit, and you read this and you try that and read that. I've kind of tried to be in all areas of the railroading. You know, I call myself a general master of none, a little bit of tinkering with all.
Very, very nice. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well done, Lester. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope you guys, it was time well spent for you.
Definitely, definitely.
Thank
Well,
you.
does anybody else have any questions for Lester or anything else they'd like to present on today?
Actually, this is Michael. I do have a question for Lester. You know, Lester, your building where you had the details on the inside towards the near the beginning of the presentation.
That one where I showed the freight house?
Yeah. The
There-
lights, how did you leave the lights hanging
You
there?
mean the
The-
wiring? Well, what I do with most of my, I showed you only one interior structure. You saw two. You saw the interior lighting on
Right.
also on the lumberyard area. What I
mhm.
do is my wiring is my structures, and if you also caught, believe it or not, most of them are removable. They're on a base. They drop into place. That way, if you ever wanted to change the structure, you get tired of it. My idea was I could now pull that one out, build a new one on the same base, drop it in. But so as a result, for the wiring, in the inside of the building, I just have brass wire, two of them for your plus minus, right, to act as a conduit. And then the lighting is soldered on at the ceiling level, and then the bulbs are run. You saw like in that freight house where the wire ran across the top. The reason I couldn't put it in the rafters, which if I turn the roof over, all the rafters are there too, but I want the roof removable so I can once in a while impress somebody, maybe a little that I've done some work. But anyway, so that you always have two brass wires for conduit. The bulbs, I still use the bulbs of the leads, would be soldered there. And then underneath, those brass wires go into tubes that are drilled, so it would be the wire is going, that brass wire in the building sticks into the tube that's in the layout, going underneath where the wires come up to. So that's how I wire my buildings, so they're completely removable. And if
Thank
you
you.
want to remove the roofs, you can do that via the process I described with the brass wires acting as conduit. You paint them gray, that's what conduit is, right? Usually you find it in gray color tubes. It takes a little bit of work, but I think it's worth the effort to do that. Obviously, all buildings, if you don't have an interior, then it makes no difference. All you need is the bulbs coming up and the wires through the floor of the building. But if you want to remove the building, you still have to have at least connectors somewhere to be able to do that.
Thank you. I really did like how the lamps seem to be suspended right there, even when the roof is removed.
Yeah, that like I say, that's why yes, so you can do that. And that's, if you notice that wire, if we went back to that scene, that wire is coming off of two pieces of brass, wire that are acting as conduits for the bulb to be soldered onto. And then twisted and bent. What's nice about the wire too is then once you can now twist it, and then once you get it twisted, you can bend it in the shapes you need for it, and it'll hold its position in a structure.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here and for letting me present to you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I really enjoy these presentations.
Well, I think everybody here does a wonderful job when they do a presentation and sharing. That's what our great hobby is about. We guys, in my opinion, you agree with me, disagree with me, but I think we're in the greatest hobby there is. I've been involved in photography, woodworking, et cetera, et cetera. But if you think of model railroading, I don't care if you want to sit and read a magazine, you're an armchair railroader. Great. You're looking at history. You can read a book. You can, whether you want, if you build a railroad, you become a carpenter, you become an artist. You can, and it's on and on. It's fantastic. And the sharing in this hobby, everybody I've met including all of you out here visiting, today. It's fabulous. And we share. And as a result, we learn from each other and we grow and we become better at if I didn't have guys in my day, that gas station, you might have taken a scene, which you saw the backside of, that was above the mini scene of the Greyhound bus depot. When I first built that, I had this grand idea, I'll take it to a contest and see how well I can do. And I went up against a railroader who had won 3 gold awards at the NMRA convention. You remember a name, you may not. His name was Jacques Opelon. He was out of Winnipeg, Canada. And in the contest, of course, he took first place because he had Venetian blinds in his structure and that were actually working Venetian blinds. And that's why he won the gold award. But anyway, he looked at my structure and he said, "Hey kid, that's really pretty good." He said, "You can pursue it." And he said, "You stay at it. You'll be okay at this one day." So I've never forgotten that, guys. And that structure did not win anything at the first time, believe it or not. But that's another thing, when if the people I feel in our hobby offer us constructive criticism, guys, I think it's great to accept it. A lot of guys right away start pouting and they get all bent out of shape over this. You don't learn that way. We wish we were all perfect model railroaders out of get-go, but I wasn't. Maybe some of you guys are, but I had a lot of learning. And you know what? I can learn from a lot of you every day too in a presentation that's given here.
Absolutely. All right. Well done, Lester. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We don't have anybody scheduled for next week. So if anybody's interested in presenting, just contact me or Ron and we'll get you signed up. Otherwise, we'll just do a general update. And so that's fine too. If you let me know you're going to present, I'll put you first on the list. Otherwise, you can always just pipe up during the meeting and share your screen, and we enjoy that too. So thanks everybody for coming, and it's great to see everybody. Thanks again, Lester. We'll see you guys next week.
Again, very welcome. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. I'm sorry, and ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, you heard the background, the CEO. It's better.
That's right. That's right.
Take care. Thank you.
Right.
Good night. Bye-bye.